everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Sit Down, the show where anything goes and nothing gets left behind. As always, I am Steve, your friendly neighborhood lawn gnome, and I'm hoping that all of you are doing well and staying healthy in these crazy, crazy times. It's kind of interesting because of the fact that I feel like the last Sunday Sit Down I did was such a way back, and especially with what's going on in the world today, people sometimes don't even know what day of the week it is or what month it is. It's kind of crazy. But I'm glad to know that my monthly segments, including Sunday Sit Down, are very much alive. And because of what's going on right now, this has also given a great deal of us to really take a step back and reflect about ourselves and the world around us, and more importantly, really take the time to appreciate some of the most important things in our lives. And this has been a very interesting time for a large portion of the world because of the fact that there is a large portion of the world that is very much connected to their respective faiths. We're also living in a world where things are evolving. We're having breakthroughs in technology, breakthroughs in science, to the point in time where some people feel that religion doesn't really have its place in the world. But I seriously disagree. My story is a little bit different from others, but I really wanted to talk about what's going on in the world as it evolves, particularly in the areas of entertainment and where faith's role takes its place. And I've got a fantastic guest with me today. My friend Katie from the Introverted Reader is here. If you haven't heard of her, I'm really hoping that you check out her channel. So Katie, let me just say good afternoon to you, because it is the afternoon by you. It is it's very early in the morning by me, but that's fine. Thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Thank you for having me. I feel very welcome.
Is this your first live stream ever in regards to collabing with others?
Yep, pretty much, yep.
Well,
never done it before.
Well, I will say that you're in for a real treat, because we're going to have a conversation about something that is very much significant and important to yourself and myself. So as always, everybody, I have 7 questions for my guest, and we're going to see where the conversation takes us. So the first place I usually like to go when it comes to the Sunday Sit Downs is I like to begin at the beginning, and that is, let's go through a little bit of a background about yourself in regards to faith growing up, and what was its impact and what role did it play in your life?
It was something that was, it's something that I always like to think of it. It's something that's part of me as much as my arm is a part of me, because I literally have been going to church my entire life. You know, we've been raised in the same church all our lives, and you know, like, I would always get confused as a child whenever people would talk about, like, oh, I don't go to church, I don't do it, but I'd be like, why? It's been as much a part of my life as like everything else. Like, I would go to school during the week and then church on Sunday. It was just about as natural for me as taking a breath or lifting something. So if you ask me to describe what my faith and my church are to me, it's something that's ingrained in here, or but a part of me as my hand or my arm. So if that makes any kind of sense.
No, that's actually a very, very powerful thing, and also very uplifting. I mean, I am not of the Christian faith. I was actually raised in the religion of Judaism, and New York is actually probably one of the best places for someone outside of the state of Israel to really practice Judaism, because there are so many Jewish people in so many different Jewish backgrounds all over the New York metro area and even the tri-state area. So my religion, I was raised, is what something is called modern Orthodox. What that is people who practice the rules of Judaism, but at the same time also have a very strong secular attitude. My dad, when I was growing up, as going to synagogue and observing the holidays and observing a great deal of the Jewish rules and traditions, was very much a part of my life. He also always ingrained in me and my siblings, you know, you're you're going to go to school, then you're going to go to college, and then you're going to go get a job so you can live and have a very prosperous life, have children of your own, and make sure that the traditions of the religion are passed on. I will definitely say that in the times that we're living in right now, we, just as Christians and Jews alike, just had a very, very important Holy Week recently. And I know that in the Islam population, Ramadan is very much fast approaching. And it was definitely different this year because, much like Christianity and Judaism, one of the things that is not just going to your places of worship and following the rules, family is essential. And for Easter and for Passover, the big thing is getting the family together for the dinners and reflecting and being appreciative of everything around you. And it was so weird not being able to do that this year.
I know. I said, I was saying that to my mom actually the other night. We try and go out on walks just like around our neighborhood in the evenings. And it was Good Friday, and I remember just looking at my mom and being like, it's just so weird that, you know, we're here now, it's Good Friday, and like we didn't go to church, like we didn't see anyone. It just feels so weird. But you know, we made do. You know, we came back and we actually had a little bit of prayer time, just the three of us, like me and my mom and my sister, so that was nice. Although it is always nice being in that, it's always nice being in that environment, because I do miss getting up and going every Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, for me, when the Sabbath was upon us, that's when I was growing up and I went to synagogue every Saturday. Now, what's very interesting with me is I didn't want to necessarily say that I broke away from Judaism entirely, but I definitely started to feel a little bit more secular, and I don't really go to synagogue as often as I used to, and I don't really observe the holidays as strongly as I used to, but they're still very much a part of me. I think what's actually kind of funny is at the end of it, also my wife was not raised as observant as I was, but when we got married, we both sort of tried to bring each other's attitudes towards the religion and find a happy medium. So I think what's kind of funny is that she and I professionally actually work for Jewish organizations. She works for a Jewish elementary school. I work for a Jewish nonprofit run college. So Judaism is still very much within our everyday lives there. And it's sort of nice to a certain degree, because even though we don't go to synagogue all the time, when we do, it's nice. And also going to one specific synagogue in a community my entire life, it felt really weird to a degree to break away from that when I moved and had to find my own new Jewish community. And the fact that I can't really go to synagogue now is a little bit disheartening, because I'm really still trying to build myself in the community. But there have been some ways, you know, using things like Zoom and Google Hangouts, people have been trying to do services, whether it's Christian or Islam or Hinduism, whatever religion you observe, there's just so many ways that people are still trying to connect the religious communities. And I think that that's very powerful. But I agree with you. When everything gets back to normal, it is going to feel great to actually go back to the houses of worship, see the congregations in person, speak to your pastor, speak to your rabbi. It's just going to be a good feeling when everybody gets to go back to the true traditions.
Yeah, absolutely. And like that, you know, just pegging off what you said about traditions, like traditions are just so, it's just one of the like fundamentals in like my family. Like tradition for me is so sacred and so important, especially when it comes to like our faith and stuff like that. Like, and I'm autistic as well, and anyone that's on the spectrum knows we don't do well with change. So if any, like, because literally the world is spinning on its axis right now, and like for anyone that is listening to this right now that is on the ASD spectrum, my heart goes out to you, my friend. I know that like change is awful, but like you said, it's gonna be so great whenever we get back to normality and we're back in that environment again. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, and it's just nice to hear, even though, some of the news that we're still hearing, a great deal of it is still very much on the negative.
Yeah.
I think for the last week and a half, 2 weeks, there's definitely been a lot more positive news coming out in terms of medical breakthroughs, especially what's happening in the United States. The fact that they're even in places like New York City, which I am relatively close to, even in a hot spot for COVID-19 like New York City, the fact that the governor and the mayor are already starting to talk about the plans to reopen things, hopefully sooner than later. It's just nice to see that proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. It's in sight, or still, I would say, a good distance away. But as every day passes, people feel like we're getting closer and closer.
Yeah, like I saw someone say the other day, don't think of it as another day in quarantine. It's another day closer to it being over, or another day closer to the end.
Exactly. So let's move on to the second question. In regards to the fact that faith is something that is very important to you, and of course very important to your family, there have been some stories that I have heard from some people that when it comes to secular entertainment, some people were actually prohibited in regards to actually being exposed to some of those things. Did you by any chance fall into that category? And in regards to things that were secular, what was the family attitude towards it?
It's laughable to me, honestly. Like, I have met several people over my lifetime that were raised Christian just like me, that are only like experiencing Harry Potter for like the very first time. And I would say, but why? Like, I read Harry Potter for the first time when I was 10 years old, and you're almost 30, like, what's going on? Then but then they were like, oh yeah, growing up, my mom and dad didn't want us reading it, or they didn't want us watching it because they thought it would encourage us to practice witchcraft, which made no sense to me, because I was just like, I mean, see, the thing is, when it came to stuff like that, Harry Potter, for example, like, you're like magic and flying chocolate frogs flying about the place and sitting in a great hall with snow coming down from the ceiling. That's clearly not real. It's fantastical. It's wonderful. And I remember sitting there being like, I don't feel the urge to start, like, I don't want to lift a wand and start practicing witchcraft. Like, I never understood that. But for me, for me growing up, it was more to do with stuff like that, like Harry Potter. That's clearly for children. But the stuff that was more mature, obviously, when my father lived with us, he always used to watch like really like gritty films and stuff, mostly westerns. And if things were getting violent, or if they're like, I would be in the room playing or something, or if my mom caught me looking at the television between a particularly grisly scene, she'd be like, don't look at the TV, turn away. But like, it was stuff like that, like if it was getting graphic or if it was getting violent, they would turn me away. But like, when it came to, the fantastical stuff, like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, what's another example? I'm trying to think.
The Chronicles of Narnia or something like that.
Yes, Narnia. Yes, thank you. Like, goodness sake, when my sister was growing up, she got this big thing of fairy tales that had witches and fairies and stuff like that. But I think my parents had their heads screwed on tight enough to know that, like, that is fictional. That's not real. I very highly doubt any of my daughters are going to be witches after this. But I think most times those ones that are restricted, I can understand it. Like, I understand it to some extent, but anytime I hear it, I'm just like, that's so weird. Like,
yeah, I definitely will say that I fell into the exact same category as you. My parents knew pretty much that their kids were not dumb as bricks. Like, if my dad's going to go on a date night with my mom, they know that if they're going to go see a rated R movie, do not bring a 6-year-old into the theater with them, because they clearly know that movie is not appropriate for them. No, my parents basically said, like, everything that had restrictions on them, like if it was a parental discretion advisory sticker on some music, if it was a rated R film, if it was a TV show that was for mature audiences only, they said you can't watch this until you're old enough. Now, sometimes did things slip through the cracks because of the fact that the restrictions might not have been so stringent. A perfect example would be one of the most legendary and most well-known comedies, which was Married with Children. When I was in my preteens, my mom and dad would let me watch it with them, but when I actually told one of my teachers in school to go to hell, they said, yeah, you're not allowed to watch that anymore. So they basically waited a year or two until they felt, okay, now I think you have a little bit more maturity. I think there were a couple of things that my mom particularly, because, you know, that's a mother, a loving mother. She wants to make sure her kids are safe. There were a couple of things that she looked at that just weren't what she felt nice for kids. A perfect example was The Simpsons. That show came out when I was 8 years old, and she didn't like the fact that a cartoon family that was not for kids was out there because kids are probably going to try and sneak it. I was 8 years old when the show came out. She believed that Bart Simpson was just not a perfect role model for kids. She's like, you shouldn't be watching this show. So I actually was not allowed to watch The Simpsons for about 6 years. The reason why she let me start watching it along with my siblings was because of the fact that my mom's twin sister, my aunt, was letting her kids who were much younger than me watch the show. And at the same time, my aunt was a huge fan of the show herself. And she was trying to tell my mom, yes, it's a little bit more, you know, mature, but she says it's not something that's going to give your kids bad habits. He's like, your oldest, meaning me, who at that point in time was finally like 11, 12, she says, he can watch it now. Let him watch it. So she said, yes, you can watch the show, but she always let me read comic books. Superheroes was my bread and butter. A lot of the movies that I was going to see, the PG-13 movies, I started watching at an earlier age because she knew that even though there was some foul language in there, she knew that I wouldn't use it in school, or I wouldn't use it in public or anything like that. When I got to be a teenager, you know, the barriers started being let down, but that was it. But I actually also knew somebody, actually one of my sister's friends, who was not allowed to read Harry Potter when she was a kid. I find it so funny that it seems to be Harry Potter was the universal restricted book amongst most children who were very much connected to faith. You know, it's kind of funny.
Don't read it. You're going to go to hell for practicing witchcraft. But just whenever you were talking about seeing your first PG-13 like movie for the first time, didn't you feel so grown up sitting in that movie theater just being so smug, like, I'm watching a PG-13, I'm so grown?
Oh, I'll give you one better. When I officially turned 17, on the day of my birthday, my best friend and I went to go see a rated R movie together because we were both 17. So that was like that to me was more exciting than actually getting my driver's license.
Really?
You know? Oh, you know what? When I was growing up, I really didn't care about driving a car. I was not one of those kids like one of my other really best friends. He loves cars. He likes to work on them. He loves the details. He loves the working parts. Me, I always say, as long as the car gets me from point A to point B, the air conditioner works when it's hot and the radio works, I don't care about what the car looks like or how it drives. So when I got my driver's license, don't get me wrong, it was uplifting, but going to see a rated R movie, because you watch my channel, movies are my passion as well as TV and other things, that was great. Unfortunately, the movie wasn't really great at the end of the
movie
day.
not so much, but it's the experience, you know. And like I like my sister's favorite movie growing up was Pretty Woman, and she accidentally swore once in Sunday school because we were talking about things you shouldn't say, and then she uttered a bad word, and our Sunday school teacher was not impressed. But I actually didn't watch that for the first time till I got into my late 20s. And it's not that good.
You know, I still do need to watch that movie. I have never seen Pretty Woman before, but I do know that the play that it's based on, that the movie's based on, which is Pygmalion, which is also My Fair Lady. You know, so I watched the My Fair Lady film from the 1960s with Audrey Hepburn, and I do really like that movie. I think the story is so adorable, and I love the songs. Although, in my personal opinion, even though Audrey Hepburn is an iconic actress, I still have heard the My Fair Lady songs sung by the great Julie Andrews, and I'm like, oh, if Julie Andrews was in that movie, it would have been so much more awesome. Julie Andrews is one of my all-time favorite actresses, and her voice is just gorgeous. Sound of Music, Mary Poppins, absolutely beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Yes. Absolutely, yeah. So the third question that I have is actually something that we sort of started discussing, so we could just elaborate a little bit more on that. That was you discovering the entertainment in your own way, especially because of the fact that your faith is very important to you. You know, as an adult, growing up and starting to get exposed to all these new things, you know, you obviously see in the world of entertainment, the bars are getting pushed to a certain degree. Does it bother you with the fact that secular society is actually trying to up the ante, if you will, in regards to specific things in entertainment? Or do you just feel that you know that you have a strong moral compass, you know, is something you feel might be too much for you, you know, anyone else out there, you know, you can have it, but I'm just gonna stay away from it. How do you feel about that?
Well, just like you said, I know who I am. I know what my own morals are, and you know, I'm the type of person that if anything makes me that bit uncomfortable, I'm just like I just back away. Like if a TV show is just going too far, I'll just be like, nope, not watching that. And all that. But like, I mean, there are a few times when I'm just like, just sometimes, like, you know, when they like poke fun or like make like a little joke. I know, like, I can laugh at a joke, but I mean, obviously there's times when like, I don't know, like if I'm reading a book and religion is brought into it and the people that follow it are viewed as, I don't know, like crazy or like not all there in the head or whatever, that is what bothers me. Like, I'm not crazy, you know, like I don't like the idea of just religious people in general being portrayed as just crazy and just like weird or whatever. Like, I'm weird in my own way. I don't need you telling me that I'm weird just because I'm a Christian.
If we weren't, if everybody was not weird, society as a whole would just be so boring, you know?
That's it. But to the question, it bothered me in that sense whenever you know, religious people were looked at as lunatics, but in other ways I would just it would just roll off me, really. Like when I was younger, I would get really wound up about it, but then it was just a case of like, listen, they don't know us, they don't know who we are, they only have one view of what they think they know, and you know, what we know is what we know. So like, most times it just rolls off my back.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you in the exact same way. I mean, I definitely remember, especially going into high school and going through college, I think when I started seeing the bar getting pushed, ironically, it really goes back to animated sitcoms like Family Guy and The Simpsons and South Park. I still remember when South Park came out back in 1997, and it was like one of the very first times where I actually saw an animated show with like a warning sign on before it, basically saying that this is going to be a bit different. It's not going to be for the faint of heart. There's going to be foul language, some really heavy subjects. And so, you're like, you know, just beware. But I also think what was kind of funny was when you take a look like at a show like Family Guy, I mean, like, it's one of the most popular television shows on TV now. I still remember that show, you know, still being on network television when the pilot came out in 1999, right after the Super Bowl. I watched the pilot with my friends, and my brother was with me and my cousin, so we all watched it together. it was the weirdest and to a certain degree surprising thing to actually, I think that might have been the first time that we all ever heard the word penis ever on network television. Not on cable, not on HBO. It was like, wow, like they actually got away with that. But
you said the word.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was a shock to me. But also, even things that are not necessarily supposed to be raunchy, like one of the series of shows that I don't really like watching on television is doctor shows, because I can go into an action movie and watch someone take a bullet to the head and watch like blood fly all over and be completely okay with that.
Not blink.
But when I watch doctors going and performing an operation and you're actually seeing like the graphic nature, that is where I literally have to pull away. I cannot watch that. And it's gotten, even on shows that are, I mean, I think one of the most pioneering shows that really pushed the bar on that was the legendary show that it was, ER. And I couldn't watch it. It was just too much for me. And also, they're even in books, like I've already read this book 2 times already, and it's a chunk. I read Stephen King's It, because I love the movies. The movies are great, but there are certain things that are in that book. Yeah, there are certain things in that book that are not in the movie. And I will just say thank God for that, because they are very much immoral and wrong. And a lot of people who have actually read the book on BookTube right now have actually talked about said specific thing. And that is also where, you know, I've read it. I've seen the graphic nature in my mind, and I'm just like, no, this is wrong. But that's the thing. It's like, if someone actually is exposed to something that I'm exposed to in the same way, and I may find it weird, but they don't bat an eye, I'm not going to point my finger at them and say, no, you're a bad person because you have no issue with that. It's the same thing that I certainly feel about the BookTube community. Like, there's been a couple of things in the community when it comes to things like sexual orientation and racism and stuff like that. And there are just some people that will acknowledge it, but they won't go flailing up in arms and saying, cancel that. You don't necessarily have to be that kind of person, but the fact that you acknowledge it and still believe that it's not right, but you also understand the reason why it was put into the words on that specific book or shown on, I mean, like a perfect example, if you watch a movie like 12 Years a Slave and you see Lupita Nyong'o's character, who's a slave, gets whipped by her southern white master in the United States, it's like, yes, you know that it's wrong, but you also have to understand that that movie and that scene was made to show you this was what happened. It was that brutal. I mean, as a Jewish person, seeing a lot of things that depict the Holocaust, yes, it's hard to watch it sometimes because it was real. I've heard the stories. I had, unfortunately, all my grandparents have passed away, unfortunately, but they all, thank goodness, passed away at very much old and fulfilling ages. God bless them. But, you know, they've told me the stories. I mean, one of my grandparents was not born in Europe during that time. He was born in America, but he went and he fought the Battle of Normandy. He was on the beaches. The fact that I actually got to know him and hear these stories, you know, it's very powerful, but I'm not going to yell at somebody because they just look at these things and just don't like bawl their eyes out or say this, or just like scream and shout saying this was wrong, this should never happen. As long as they say like, yes, it happened, it was a terrible thing, that's fine. You know? So the fourth question is, let's talk a little bit about your BookTube beginnings. And let's talk a little bit about some of those big books that might in fact have had those specific types of things. I mean, like, I didn't read them, but I know for a solid fact that one of the most popular books that is talked about is Sarah J. Maas's Court series. And there's a lot of specific things that a lot of people like to talk about. I think what's kind of funny is Crescent City, some people have been talking about the lack thereof of specific things that they wanted to see. But anyway, let's talk a bit about those books loved so much about the community, and how did you feel about those specific things?
Well, when I started the channel that I have right now, I was already a reader. I had read a good number of books prior to coming on. Like, I had read, obviously, Harry Potter. I'd read Cassandra Clare. I'd read the House of Night series that I've been reading since I was 17. So I'd read a lot of the like big books, I guess, but I didn't really discover who Sarah J. Maas was until I got to book 2. And I remember reading the Throne of Glass series and thinking it was really, really good. It's okay, but personally, I don't know, maybe I was just too young when I was reading them. I just didn't really acknowledge the problem, or I didn't really see what was problematic and what was not, but in that series specifically. But then whenever I got to ACOTAR, and I read that, and like a lot of people will say that it's problematic, but at the same time, it's still one of those books that everybody goes back to. Like, whenever they're in like a reading slump or something, they're like, oh, I'll just reread ACOMAS. Like, I really don't care. Like, I mean, yes, it's problematic, but like, I mean, I don't mean to like go there, but they're just thirsty. That's just it. It's the thirst. You are thirsty. You read about Rysand, you want a Rysand for your own, and you just want that. And like, even people that don't even overly like Sarah J. Maas will still go back and reread that trilogy, or the second one in particular everybody seems to like. But
yeah, ACOMAF, that's the one.
Yeah.
My wife has read that book 6 times.
But like, you know, which I have no problem with. Like,
yeah, no, neither do I. She loves it.
Do what you will, it's fine. Yeah. But you know, but like everybody was trying to get me to read Outlander, and I got the first book for Outlander, and I actually decided to watch the first episode of the TV show, and it was garbage. So I was like, no, I don't care. Jamie's not that good looking. That's an unpopular opinion, but like, I don't like Jamie, so I got rid of that. But like, any of the bigger books that are out there, I get into them, I read them, but like, most times I'm just like, it's just a book. It's entertainment. The same
exactly
way a
right.
TV show or a movie or whatever, like, it's just entertainment. Like, mostly I feel like people need to stop taking it so seriously. I'm just like, let's just relax.
Yeah,
just
I feel that the whole thing about a fandom, I think right now there seems to be a lot more fanatics than just flat out fans. You know, like, I will definitely say that one of the most controversial things that has been going on in the world of entertainment in the last couple of years has been the recent films of Star Wars. And you know, when I was
Rise of Skywalker, I'm slapping.
well, listen, I grew up loving Star Wars as a kid, you know, as a teenager, you know, Star Wars was everything. But I think what's kind of funny is, particularly with YouTube in general, because of the fact that YouTube has given me the incentive to not just go see new movies in theaters and talk about the ones that I've loved, you know, there are so many classic films that I knew for a solid fact that I should see. I mean, like, I'll mention movies like Lawrence of Arabia, Casablanca, Cleopatra, Gentleman's Agreement. You know, I always knew that these movies were great movies. You know, some of these are award winners, Oscar winners. You know, the fact that I had never seen a film with Humphrey Bogart in it or Audrey Hepburn in it, you know, or Faye Dunaway. I was like, I knew that these were all great movies, but I had to see them. So the fact that I decided to watch some classic movies and also even see movies that I missed in theaters, because now there's so many ways to do so, now I get it. And because of that, Star Wars is not, to me, anymore like the greatest films of all time. But the fact that, you know, I'm not the biggest fan of the sequel trilogy, you know, if you love it, great. If you don't like it, you don't have to like it. You know, that's just the way it is. But, you know, BookTube definitely gave me more of an outlet to finding out who is out there. Because of BookTube, I discovered Marissa Meyer. I discovered Brandon Sanderson, who is now one of my favorite fantasy authors and sci-fi authors out there. He is just such an incredible author. I love how he creates characters. I love how he creates these worlds. His action sequences, which is such a challenge in the pages of books to make it vivid and exciting and in your face. He does that, and he does it so well. I am blown away by how well he writes these things, because that's challenging. It's the reason why Mockingjay as a book was not so well received when it came out, because she tried to do something different. And by she, I mean Suzanne Collins. She tried to give us more of a visual depiction of that world, and it just didn't work. When the movies came out, it all made a little bit more sense. And I actually do like the movies more than I do Mockingjay the book. And the reason I say movies is because everyone forgets Mockingjay was split into 2 films. So, but I do still think that The Hunger Games and Catching Fire, the books are much better than the films. I really, really believe that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, I love these authors, but I know that when it comes to contemporary fiction or books like that are written by Cassandra Clare or Sarah J. Maas, I just know for a solid fact that I probably won't enjoy them. And it's just because of the fact that when it comes to contemporary fiction, you know, like 2 of the biggest contemporary fiction books that came out in the last 5 years were The Hate U Give and, you know, Simon versus the Homo Sapiens Agenda. I actually did see the films, and I thought the films were very enjoyable. I personally thought that Love, Simon felt like a John Hughes movie to me, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off or The Breakfast Club, you know, even though it was directed by Greg Berlanti, who is responsible for the Arrowverse on TV. I thought he did a great job. I mean, I still say that Simon's room in that movie is one of the coolest rooms ever, but that's such a John Hughes thing. John Hughes just knew how to make teenagers' rooms like the room that every teenage boy or girl ever wanted in their life. That's awesome. That was actually the first film that a Funko Pop ever actually appeared in, also, just in case you didn't know that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool.
I love that movie. I love that. I cried when I was watching that.
Yeah, I mean, I found it that it wasn't perfect, but I still did have a very good time with the film. I thought it was a very enjoyable film, and I thought the actors were fantastic in the film as well. But when it comes to contemporary fiction and book, you know, I'm not really going to grab onto those. It's like, if I want to see what's going on in the real world, I'll just open my door and I'll just go take a walk outside. But that's just me. I have no issue with people reading those kinds of books. I mean, Rainbow Rowell is one of the biggest names in contemporary fiction right now. Clearly, you disagree, and you don't.
Wait. Okay.
I saw that face.
Let me reiterate what I said.
Please.
Wait, no, Your Honor, let me speak. Okay, right. I have an interesting relationship with Miss Rainbow, mostly because the first book I read from her was Eleanor and Park. I enjoyed the majority of that, but the ending really, really just put me off, and it got borderline problematic, but I don't want to get into it. Then I read Fangirl, and that spoke to my soul. I love that book. And then I read, what was it? But the 2 girls that work in the office.
Well, the only other one that I could think about was Carry On.
They're emailing each other back and forth, and this guy who works in the office is like security or something, and he has to check everybody's emails, and he's like reading their conversations. It's Attachments, that's what it's called. Okay. That was bad. And then Landline, which I read, which is kind of got like a magical realism sort of thing, because she picks up the phone and it's like her husband's younger self from like 10 years ago or something, or she's speaking to herself from 10 years ago. I can't remember, but that was terrible. That book was so bad. Like, it was just, I just could not. The only books from her that I would probably recommend to anybody would be Fangirl and Carry On. Have not read Wayward Son yet. a lot of people have been saying a lot of negative things about that, and I'm scared.
Look, to be fair, whether it's an author or a director, not everything in their library is going to be perfect. I mean, let's bring up Marissa Meyer again. You know, everybody, the Lunar Chronicles is a fun ride. I'm in the middle of rereading them. I just finished Scarlet. I mean, I have been saying this for a while. I know that people want to see the Lunar Chronicles become a movie, but I personally feel that if it's going to become a movie, it's got to be done in anime format. I just see the Lunar Chronicles like anime. It just feels that way to me. But I remember when Heartless came out, and I was asking a whole bunch of my people who I've subscribed to, you know, is this a book that you think that I would enjoy? And not many people liked it, you know. People had mixed reviews about Heartless. But then she bounced back. Renegades comes out, and Renegades, I think Renegades is better than the Lunar Chronicles. I will, if that's an unpopular opinion.
Supernova.
Oh yeah, I love Supernova.
I finished Supernova the other day, and I was like, wow.
Yeah, so because I have to admit, I love that she really went further than I thought she would in regards to some of those scenes. Like, I was like saying to myself, wow, if Marissa Meyer ever wanted to write an actual story for a comic book series, like if she wanted to write a couple of issues of X-Men, I'm like, you do it. I think that you would just do so well with X-Men, or I think that, oh man, for DC, I think she would be great at writing the Teen Titans. That would be a great story for her to read. I would love to see her write that too. Because it's also nice to know, like, when authors actually create comic books, or when comic book writers actually do crossover into literature. That would be, I think we need more of that. That's just me. I mean, especially when some of these artists, and when some of these authors wrote that DC series, I think it was Leigh Bardugo who wrote that Catwoman book, and or the Wonder Woman book. I can't remember which one.
It was, she did Wonder Woman. Sarah J. Maas did Catwoman.
Yeah, so it's like when they do stuff like that, I like that. I appreciate the fact that things like those kinds of superheroes that were considered uncool when I was growing up are now actually being more relevant. But it's also because of the fact that the MCU films and the DCEU films have been so popular that superheroes are all the rage. But to see them in different lights, like in Renegades, is great. And also with a lot of classic science fiction finally like getting a revitalization, like a couple of years back, Blade Runner 2049, and now with the new incarnation of Frank Herbert's Dune becoming a film with Timothée Chalamet amongst other amazing actors, you know, that's where stories like the specific one that I still need to read, the Scythe series, a world like that, you know, it's nice to see these kinds of mediums coming out more and actually getting a very, very strong following. And if people like it, that's great. If people don't like it, that's great too. You know, everyone is entitled.
That's it.
So we also touched upon this little topic. We can go a little bit more into it. And that was, how do you feel about religion portrayed in entertainment these days? You already said that one of your biggest issues is when people who are extremely religious are not really looked at in the greatest of lights.
Yeah, just mostly just looked at like as like weird or crazy. But a lot of things I've noticed, adjust my position. A lot of things that I noticed lately, particularly with a lot of young adult books, is that like someone would mention religion, and the main character would go off on like this inner monologue being like, I mean, I heard about the religion, but like I'm just too cool for that. Like I just don't care. And I'm just like, that's great. But like a lot of times there would be a lot of scenes where the religious person would be like belittled almost for having the beliefs that they have, or like everybody be rolling their eyes like, oh, don't listen to her, she's nuts. And, you know, main protagonist is all like, you know, I mean, I don't really care about religion. Like, I don't care. Like, I probably doesn't even exist anyway. And I'm just like, shush. Can you just shush? Like, you're not cooler than me just because you don't believe in God. Like, we're all going to be buried the same way, sis. So get off your high horse. But, like, But I mean, that's in books. I mean, a lot of times in film, it's the same sort of thing. They're portrayed as like weird or crazy or not all there. But I remember watching the BBC remake of Dracula. They did
Ooh,
like a
I heard about
3-part
that.
series of Dracula, and they made Van Helsing a woman,
Oh,
and she was there was a scene set in this convent, and just really whenever without giving too much away, whenever Dracula and Van Helsing first like saw each other, like Van Helsing didn't bat an eyelash. She was the most badass nun I've ever seen in my life. Like, she belittled Dracula. She burned him to a T. Like, she was like tossing holy water on him and just being like, look at you, you're pathetic. Like, you literally can't even cross this gate just to get to me. What's wrong with you? And like, I love that. I love it whenever, and I like it especially if like there's ever a time, it's very rare, but if there's ever a time when the religious person in the TV show or in the book or whatever just turns around and that's
yeah.
how I feel. Welcome to my TED Talk.
Yeah, there you go. You see, I feel that when it comes to entertainment, I have a little bit of a different take on it. Hollywood and entertainment as a whole, we're just going into movies right now, a lot of the major film companies and a lot of people, past and present and future, that are in the acting world, most of them actually are of the Jewish faith. And I think it's kind of funny how at the beginning, when movie studios were starting to be made, particularly the founder of the legendary MGM Studios, he was a Jewish person who didn't want to be connected to his faith at all. So much, in fact, that he specifically tried to make films that showed a world where Jewish people didn't even exist. He basically wanted to steer clear from it as far as possible. I also feel that when it comes to portraying people like myself in a film, now, do I need to see Jewish people on the big screen or in the pages of books? No, I don't care. Because even though faith does connect me with other people, you know, it's really more so about, you know, our interests and our passions that really connect. But at the same time, it's kind of funny. It's like, when I do find out that there's someone out there that's Jewish, I will ask some more questions and just, like, you know, try to get them a little bit to know a bit better. But when it comes to a lot of Jewish people in television and in film and even in books, it always seems to take place during the Holocaust. And I'm just like, why? I mean, I think what's kind of funny is one of my favorite things growing up, of course, was the X-Men. And what's so interesting about the X-Men is that there is a whole taking on Magneto. Why is he so angry with the human race? He's angry with the human race because he lost his family in the Holocaust. He's a Holocaust survivor. But we also have the X-Men Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat. And she is a Jewish girl that is just living her life as a normal girl, but she just has mutant powers. And she doesn't really harp on her faith too much, but when it comes to the traditions, they portray the traditions. I appreciate that. I mean, one of the biggest things that's on television right now is the Amazon Prime show's Hunters, which is a very interesting take. It's basically about sort of like a superhero team, if you will, led by a Holocaust survivor that tries to hunt down Nazis living in America. That's one take. But then you get a show like The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And that is one of my favorite interpretations of Jewish people in entertainment, because they do show the traditions, but it's basically about Jewish families living their lives in the late 1950s, early 1960s. And it really is such a fun and realistic show, because it's basically like, yes, we're Jewish people, but we have our kids, we're sending them to school, we're doing our jobs, we're taking vacations, we're enjoying the company of our friends and family. We're basically doing everything that everybody else is doing, except we're just celebrating Hanukkah and we're not celebrating Christmas. That's basically what it is. And I love that. And also because of the fact that I have a massive extended family, particularly on my father's side. And when I watch these characters on that show, I feel like I'm watching my relatives because everybody acts like my relatives through that show. It's just fun. But I also really appreciate some of the stories that are coming out right now in books that take on the traditions of Judaism and like incorporate them into fantasy. I think one of the biggest books right now that, I mean, I don't think it's really huge, but a lot of people have been talking about Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. People really like the fact, and even when there are even people who are not even Jewish that read these books, and they appreciate how they get a little bit of an understanding of the Jewish traditions and how they're roped into it. And I also really liked the story Wolf by Wolf, which was sort of like an alternate history, like what if the Nazis actually did win World War II? And so it's sort of like a Hunger Games thing. It's Wolf by Wolf, and the follow-up is called Blood by Blood, and the author is Ryan Groudon. I was very much impressed with it because it really took more of a post-apocalyptic science fiction take rather than just focusing on World War II itself. But I feel that right now, when it comes to religion, I think we're seeing more of, especially in entertainment, more of understanding and more of a truthful depiction and less playing on stereotypes. I feel that when it comes to the negativity of Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that's just unfortunately something that we see more so in things like the news right now, because that's unfortunately those negative things we're seeing more so right now in the real world due to all these divisions and all of these horrible things, and less right now in entertainment. And I also appreciate the fact that in entertainment, these types of things are not being as over exaggerated or glorified as they used to be. I really like that change. So in regards to the next question, this is actually something that we hear more so amongst younger people. They believe that in the world that we are living in, I'm going to just use the air quotes, God is dead. Do you feel that religion still has a place in the modern world, specifically with how far we have come as a people, as a whole, regardless of our religious upbringings?
This got me thinking this question because I remember whenever I was still in school and studying religious education, and as getting older, in my class we would be dealing with a lot more like sort of serious issues, when it comes, how, if you're a religious person, how do you feel about someone who like commits suicide or like who has like a drug problem, stuff like that. But like one of the questions was like something along these lines, like does like religion have a place within such a scientific world? And something that was said during one of my classes was that religion and science, they don't have to be separate. Like they could easily walk hand in hand. And I'll say as well, my science teacher was a Christian, and a very, very devoted Christian at that. So like I really don't think Christianity and science need to be hating on each other, but like I feel like just, I don't know, just in this modern age, I feel like I think maybe just young people just feel that either the church doesn't care, or that the church is full of people who are not nice, if you catch my drift.
Judgmental.
Just a lot of the stories, just like a lot of horrible stories that would be coming out of like church homes back in like the 60s and stuff. I think people like more like, you know, the younger people now just feel like that's just what the church is full of, or that it's boring and you're sitting there in a really uncomfortable chair listening to an old man droning on and on and on. And a lot of times, yes, when I was growing up, not in my church specifically, but you know, if we were ever going to a service at a different church, a lot of times it would be that, sitting in a very uncomfortable wooden pew listening to an old man drone on and on. But away from that, it's for me, like I said at the beginning whenever we start recording, my faith, and I don't really like to say religion, because for me it's more belief and faith, and it's a relationship mostly that I have with God. It's a bit rocky at the moment, we're working on it, but it's not so much I have a list in front of me. Like the Bible it's not like,
The end
I don't
all
want to
be
say
all.
like it's not an instruction manual, if you know what I mean. Like it's not like a set of rules, like you must do this and you need to do that.
Guidelines.
But like, yeah, it's more just like, these are Jesus's words. This is what he wants us to do. And this is how he would say that you should live. And he set down those sort of mandates, I guess, and how you should live your life. And I try to live my life that way. And, you know, obviously in this modern world, it's very, very difficult because people like to blow it off. But like, just for me personally, I just keep going on. But I definitely feel like in this modern society that we have now, a lot of people are just like, they just don't care, because they feel like I said, that it's just a bunch of rules that you have to follow, and that's not true. And I feel like if they give it that, if you sat down with someone who was religious and just had a conversation, like that's what it all comes down to, just having a conversation like we are right now, and just being open and sharing opinions, I feel like a lot of people will be a lot more open-minded, because far too many people on the planet are closed-minded, and that needs to change.
Yes. I think that one of the best ways to describe what you were saying, a quote from one of my favorite movies, which ironically played and made fun of religion itself, which was Kevin Smith's Dogma. It was Salma Hayek's character who said, it's not about believing in faith, it's that you have faith that's more important.
Yeah.
And for me, one of the things that I didn't get a chance to tackle was when I was going into the workforce, and I personally felt that keeping the more stricter rules that I was keeping was sort of preventing me from really trying to move forward with my life. And I basically decided to take it upon myself to pick up the Old Testament, and I read it from cover to cover. I read everything. And I basically wrote down a list of things. I said, here are the things that I agree with, and here are the things that I don't agree with. And when it comes to Saturdays, you know, when I was growing up, I was not allowed to turn on a computer and do something like this. But because it's considered the Sabbath, it's the day of rest. But but as growing up and getting much older, I felt that I don't understand why getting up and going down to watch something on television while eating breakfast is classified as work. I look at that as just doing something that you enjoy. It relaxes you. It makes you feel rested. And that's the way that I feel. And I also said, I've had a lot of conversations with some friends of mine, and one of my friends said, the problem with where religion and faith is today is because of the fact that religion and faith has sort of plateaued. And the current society that we're living in right now is just continuing to move forward. We're advancing so much more on a secular level, and yet we're not seeming to move forward from a religious or faith-filled level. That's what a lot of people are thinking. And to a certain degree, I do see where they're coming from. I mean, again, I came from a more observant background. My wife did not. But when we were really thinking about getting married, I said to her, there's one thing that I would like to make sure that we do. And that is, when it comes to Judaism, the concept of kosher, certain foods that you're allowed to eat and certain foods that you're not allowed to eat, I will gladly go out to a restaurant and eat something that is classified as non-kosher, but we should at least keep a kosher home, because that way my family can come over to my house and have a meal with me. Because the last thing that I want to do is upset my family life. Now, my dad and I, we had a very important conversation when I was in my late teens, early 20s. He basically said to me, you're old enough to make decisions for yourself. If you do not feel your connection to your faith in here, then you don't need to continue. So I said to him, listen, there are certain things that I appreciate and there are certain things that I don't. I would love to just be happy, because I don't want religion to be a burden. I want religion to be a privilege, a gift, something that I love. And that's why I feel what I do right now, I am in a happy place, and I'm still extremely proud of what I am. I appreciate my faith for what it is, even though I don't hold it as strongly as others. But I'm not going to go to someone who is more religious than me or less religious than me and say you're doing it wrong. You know, you got to, right now, in order for religion, and you know what, that will really bring us into our last question. I guess I'll start it off since I'm already on the topic, and that is, we're obviously, at this point in time, we're going to keep moving forward. And hopefully religion will as well. And the question is, something that we've already touched on, do you think there is a possibility that both of these things can go hand in hand? And I truthfully feel that whether it's going to church or going to synagogue or going to mosque, what it really is about is the people within these communities need to be more open-minded, but at the same time, I feel that the heavily religious community needs to be more welcoming of others who are not heavily involved. If you basically say, listen, you may not hold the traditions that I do the same way I do, but I acknowledge the fact that you do it your own way. I acknowledge the fact that you appreciate it because you do it your own way. And that's the way I really think it needs to be done. In order for our secular world and our faith-filled world to go hand in hand, it has to really go back to the individual, and it has to go a lot less towards the community. If an individual is allowed to take their religion and treat it like a sculpture, mold it to the way that they see fit for the sake of making them happy and appreciative of what they're doing, I feel that that is the way that religion will be able to move forward with us as we keep moving forward on a secular level. Again, you may agree, you may disagree, but that's how I feel.
No, I do understand what you're saying, and I do. I do firmly believe that more church communities in general need to be more open-minded when it comes to I know just a lot of issues that are facing us now, like mental health, and as well gender identity and sexuality. Personally, for me, myself, I have been struggling so much with those issues, and I mean, I know that God loves me, and I know that God made me exactly who I am. So like Lady Gaga said, he doesn't make mistakes. But just it's more to do with the fact that even though I have sort of mentions like, oh, I'm asexual, I am attracted to both men and women, I find whatever, but don't say it out loud. Don't, be coming in here and saying those things. And my cousin came out to us as bisexual, and she got married to a woman. And like her mom is so supportive and, like, and loving and whatever. And like everybody was fine. And like, we were all fine with it, but then I was just told, like, don't be saying anything when we're in church next Sunday, about the gay wedding. And I'm like, oh, I would grind my jaw not saying about it. But like, I mean, that's one of the many issues. I feel if the church was more just open to what is happening in the world concerning those issues, like, I mean, those two things, like I mentioned, mental health and your gender identity, whatever it is, could easily go together, because it's the LGBTQ kids that are really, really struggling. And it's like, if there was more open conversation about those things, and it's like you said, a person who, like, there's people that would like take the Bible and only pick out the verses and passages and whatever that they like. I not to step on anyone's toes, but I personally do not feel that is an okay thing to do, and mostly because my opinion is just, you either take the Lord's word as a whole and keep it in your heart and just like follow the words that Jesus said, and like, it's like, don't, how can I put this into words?
You're doing a great job
like,
so far.
Don't fit it to fit your own agenda, because at the end of the day, it's his word, it's his law. And like, I do, like, I understand there's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament in particular that I am just like, wait, no, here, hold on. Like, my dad is not selling me to a man for 3 goats and a sheep.
Yeah, I know that.
But like the New Testament, like when Jesus comes down and he comes in and he's just like, no, wait, hold on. Like, this is great, but let me show you, let me just like say to you one more thing, and one thing, just to wrap up my rant or my ramblings, one thing that I really feel like people do not take into heart is that Jesus said, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. And not everyone lives by that. I try to, but a lot of people do not.
That's
and
very true.
To end up my ramblings, I feel like a lot more people need to listen to what Jesus said. Like, don't listen to what you're saying, it's what he's saying.
There's still a lot of work to do, but it's nice to know that there are some people out there that are trying to put in the time to get said work done. That's the most important thing. But anyway, I think that is going to wrap it all up. And I have to say that this turned out to be absolutely fantastic. Katie, you have given me such an amazing conversation. There's so much more to take from this and think about, and I'm really hoping that each and every one of you, whether you are religious or not, I just hope that this made you a little bit more aware of your surroundings, because in order for all of us to be good people, regardless of what we follow, if we follow, how we follow, that we just understand a little bit more about everybody else and what they do. So Katie, once again, thank you for joining me today. That was great. And I am excited to have you back very, very soon. so we can do our next big collaboration adventure, which is going to be completely different from this one. But in the meantime, I'm looking forward to seeing you all for another Sunday sit down where we have another great topic to discuss. But as always, another great YouTuber to discuss it with. I'll see you all in the next one. Hey, thank you so much for stopping by my channel today. If you're new here and want to see more of what my channel has to offer, please click on the link to my last video, or hit that subscribe button to be kept up to date with all of my uploads. Content of all sorts is posted here quite often, so trust me, you do not want to fall behind. I will see you in the comments, and actions speak louder than words.